What happens when a man's life changes drastically and those he loves cannot keep up with his transformations? This is the story of Jake, a man who, after a terrible car accident, finds himself confined to a wheelchair. His wife, Sarah, cannot cope with the new reality and decides to abandon him, plunging Jake into an abyss of despair and loneliness. He feels lost, questioning the value of his existence and whether there is still a future worth living. Jake has always been a determined man with dreams of starting his own business. Before the accident, he was a promising entrepreneur, but now, trapped in a new reality, his ambitions seem distant. Initially, depression consumes him. Days drag on, and he finds himself caught in a cycle of negative thoughts, struggling with the idea that he will never be the same again. However, amid the darkness, a light emerges. An old childhood friend, Emily, reappears in his life. She sees beyond the wheelchair and believes in Jake's potential. With Emily's support, Jake begins to believe in himself again. She inspires him to start over, to transform his pain into motivation. Together, they plan to open a catering business that reflects Jake's love for cooking. The journey is filled with challenges, but Jake's determination and Emily's confidence create a powerful synergy. With each step, Jake rebuilds himself, and the joy of living begins to blossom in his heart. As they work together, Jake discovers that true love is not limited to romantic relationships. He learns to value friendship, support, and empathy. Meanwhile, Sarah, his ex-wife, finds herself trapped in the consequences of her selfish choices. She watches from afar as Jake transforms and begins to question her own decisions. The weight of guilt haunts her, forcing her to confront what truly matters in life. In this new chapter, Jake becomes an example of overcoming adversity, showing that challenges can be faced with courage and hope. He discovers that true love can arise in the most unexpected moments, and that life, even after losses and changes, can still be filled with achievements and happiness. In the end, the question that echoes is, will Sarah understand the value of the love Jake found on his new journey? Jake faced a new world, a world where mobility was limited and emotional pain seemed infinite. His life before the accident was marked by achievements. Now, he found himself trapped in an apartment that was beginning to feel like a cell. The void left by Sarah was palpable, and every corner of the house reminded him of the woman who once believed in him, but had now vanished amid the chaos of his transformation. The phone didn't ring, and loneliness became his only companion. In the first few days, sadness enveloped him like a heavy cloak. He spent hours looking out the window, watching life pass by. People walked, ran, laughed, and hugged, while he felt increasingly invisible. It was in this gloomy setting that Emily reappeared, bringing a spark of hope. She had always been a loyal friend, but life had separated them with routines and responsibilities. Now she was there, ready to help him rise again. Emily had her own challenges. She had gone through a painful separation and was struggling to balance her career and personal life. However, Jake's determination inspired her. She saw a fire within him that had not yet extinguished. With an encouraging smile, she convinced him to take the first step, an online cooking course. The idea of cooking again made Jake feel an emotion he hadn't experienced in a long time. The following days were a roller coaster of emotions. Jake dedicated himself to the course, but frustration was also part of the process. At times, he felt incapable, battling the thought that his skills might no longer be the same. Mistakes piled up like ingredients in a disastrous dish. With each failure, his confidence wavered, and the negative inner voice shouted that he would never succeed. Meanwhile, the catering business began to take shape. Emily, always by his side, made calls, organized materials, and sought suppliers. However, difficulties arose quickly. One of the first meetings with a potential investor turned into a disaster. Jake, nervous and anxious, stuttered while presenting his ideas. The investor, who seemed promising, lost interest and left before hearing what Jake truly had to offer. Disheartened, Jake questioned whether it was worth continuing. The relationship between Jake and Emily began to be tested. They started to have disagreements due to the pressure. In his despair, Jake began to withdraw. He didn't want his friend to see his weaknesses. He didn't want her to feel obligated to carry such a heavy burden. Emily, in turn, felt the frustration of seeing Jake shutting himself off more and more. The delicate balance of their friendship was on the brink of collapse. The situation worsened when Jake received an unexpected message from Sarah. She wanted to meet him. Jake's heart wrestled between anger and longing. He had spent so long trying to move on, and now she appeared like a ghost from his past, bringing back emotions he was trying to bury. The words she spoke in the message were a mix of regret and nostalgia. Sarah wanted to apologize, but Jake didn't know if he was ready to listen or if he wanted to relive what had been. At that moment, the pressure mounted. The future of the business depended on an important event approaching, and Jake needed all his strength to present himself. The internal battle he was fighting grew each day. He felt torn between the need to move forward and the desire to confront his past. As the event approached, insecurities returned with full force. He felt that if he failed again, he would lose not only the chance to fulfill his dream, but also Emily's friendship. The difficulties Jake faced were not just external. He found himself in a constant conflict, questioning his worth and abilities. The inability to leave the past behind haunted him, and he wondered if he could truly overcome the adversities. The life lessons he tried to learn were tested at every turn, and the emotional pain became a burden he didn't know how to carry. Meanwhile, Sarah watched from afar. She began to realize how much she had underestimated Jake, and his struggle affected her deeply. Guilt consumed her, and doubts about her choices intensified. As Jake rose after each fall, she found herself confronted with the reality that perhaps she didn't know what truly mattered. His transformation was not only shaping him, but also forcing her to reevaluate her own life and the decisions she had made. The story of Jake and Emily unfolded amidst emotional and physical challenges. Each obstacle tested their strength, and the tension between them grew, creating an environment filled with uncertainties. But at the same time, the journey was rich with moments of rediscovery, friendship, and courage. Deep down, Jake began to understand that true overcoming was not just about reaching a goal, but about accepting himself with all his flaws and achievements, and finding value in human connections that could shine brightly even in the darkness. Jake was sitting at the table, surrounded by pots and ingredients, trying to prepare a dish he had learned in cooking class. The smell of garlic and onion frying in oil was familiar, but his mind was elsewhere. Sarah's message still echoed in his head, and the idea of meeting her again made him nervous. He wanted to feel free, but the past insisted on pulling him back. As he tried to focus on the recipe, something unusual happened. An accident with one of the kitchen utensils caused him to cut his hand accidentally. The sharp pain jolted him out of his trance, and for a moment everything went silent. He looked at the blood dripping from his finger, and in an instant, frustration turned into anger. Anger at himself for not being able to do something so simple, anger for what he had lost, and anger for having to deal with the fragility of his new reality. Emily, who was in the next room, heard the noise and rushed to help him. Seeing him with the injured hand, she felt a wave of concern, but also frustration. She knew that Jake's struggle was more than physical. It was emotional. "Jake, you need to stop being so hard on yourself. This is not a failure. It's a learning experience," she said, grabbing a cloth to stop the bleeding. But Jake didn't listen. The pain in his hand reflected what he felt inside. He felt broken, unable to move forward. "I can't do anything right, Emily. Everything I touch ends in disaster," he replied, his voice laden with despair. Their conversation quickly turned into an argument. Emily, tired of seeing Jake sink into self-pity, tried to be straightforward. "Jake, you're letting your insecurities win. You are stronger than this. Look at you. You're here, trying, fighting. That's courage." But Jake shut down even more, feeling that his friend didn't understand the weight he carried. The atmosphere in the house became heavy, and Jake decided he needed some time alone. He went for a walk, trying to clear his mind. The streets were full of life, but he felt like a spectator, unable to connect. As he passed by a park, he saw children playing and couples laughing. Their joy only intensified his loneliness. He remembered how he used to be, how vibrant life was before the accident. Sarah's message lingered in his mind. He had promised himself that he wouldn't look back, that he would move forward. But now, the emotional pain and insecurity made him question everything. He stopped in front of a cafe and decided to go in. While having a coffee, he noticed a group of people at a nearby table, laughing and talking about their own struggles and achievements. It was a common scene, but in that moment, it was as if a light turned on inside him. Jake realized he wasn't alone. Everyone there had their battles. Life wasn't perfect, and perhaps true strength lay not in avoiding failures, but in facing them and learning from them. His view of success began to shift. It wasn't just about building a business or achieving a goal. It was about the journey, about the struggle and the connections formed along the way. With this new perspective, Jake decided he needed to confront Sarah, not to relive the past, but to seek closure. He didn't want her pain to hold him back any longer, just as he didn't want his pain to affect her. He had to know if there was still room for forgiveness and reconciliation, not just for them, but for himself. When Jake returned home, he found Emily still waiting for him. There was concern in her eyes, but also a silent determination. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I need to talk to Sarah," Jake replied, his voice firmer. He realized he needed to face his fears, not only to move forward, but to finally free himself from the chains that bound him to the past. The friendship between them was still a delicate ground, but Jake was ready to rebuild it. He understood that the challenges they faced were not just obstacles, but opportunities for growth, and, more importantly, that human connections were one of life's greatest treasures, even amidst pain and struggle. Jake's journey was far from over, but he had finally begun to see a path ahead, one that was not just about personal overcoming, but about acceptance, forgiveness, and rediscovering what truly mattered. Jake was at a turning point in his life. After spending time facing his insecurities and fears, he started to realize that the pain he carried didn't have to be a burden. Looking at the group in the cafe, he noticed that each person there had their own struggles and stories, which made him feel less alone. The idea that everyone faced challenges made him reflect on his own journey. He understood that his struggle wasn't just about overcoming an accident or dealing with emotional pain. It was, in fact, about allowing himself to grow and learn from failures. Unlike before, when he viewed his difficulties as a sign of weakness, he now understood that these experiences were opportunities for growth. The frustration he felt while cooking wasn't a failure, but a step towards self-confidence. When Jake decided he needed to talk to Sarah, he wasn't just seeking closure, but rather a new beginning. He wanted to free himself from the chains of the past and understand that, although pain had been part of his story, it didn't have to define who he was. This new perspective helped him see that true success wasn't in avoiding mistakes, but in learning from them and moving forward. Returning home, Jake found Emily, who had always supported him. He realized that accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness, but an essential part of the healing process. Their friendship evolved, and he began to understand that human connections were fundamental to personal growth. Together, they faced life's challenges, which strengthened their bond. Jake learned that life wasn't a straight line, but a journey full of ups and downs. He started applying the lessons he had absorbed to his daily life. Every small step he took toward overcoming was a victory, and he felt stronger with each passing day. He learned to appreciate not only accomplishments, but also the small joys that life offered. Jake's transformation was profound. He not only faced his fears, but also became a more understanding and empathetic person. Looking toward the future, he felt ready to face new challenges with the certainty that he could overcome any obstacle. He understood that true personal growth came from within, and that every experience, good or bad, was part of his unique story. And so, he began to see life in a new way, with hope and determination. Jake was in his small apartment, his heart racing. He was preparing for a conversation that could change everything. Sarah, his ex-girlfriend, had agreed to meet him. It was time to face the past and the feelings that had always haunted him. He remembered the days when he felt lost, as if he were trapped in a maze with no exit. But now, with the strength he had found, he was determined not to let fear take over. When Sarah arrived, the air became tense. He saw her, and for a moment, all the memories flooded back. Laughter, happy moments, but also the pain of separation. Jake took a deep breath and began to speak. He expressed his insecurities, his struggles, and how he had learned to confront his fears. Each word felt heavy, but also liberating. Sarah listened attentively, encouraging him. Then, when he finally mentioned the accident that changed his life, tears welled up in his eyes. It was a moment of vulnerability, and Jake felt like he was shedding his barriers. He hadn't expected Sarah to react differently, but when she stepped closer, he realized she also carried her own wounds. "I'm sorry for all of this," she said, her voice trembling. "I lost myself too, but you are stronger than you think." In that instant, something changed. Jake understood that he was no longer trapped in the past. The pain didn't define him. On the contrary, it was what made him human. He smiled, feeling a weight lifted from his shoulders. The conversation turned into a new beginning. They didn't know what the future held, but they were ready to face it together as friends. Jake left that meeting not only feeling lighter, but also stronger. He learned that facing his challenges was the true path to freedom, and that life was about allowing himself to grow rather than being defined by difficulties. Jake left the meeting with Sarah feeling renewed. He realized that, although the pain of the past had shaped who he was, he didn't have to live imprisoned by it. Talking about his insecurities and fears brought unexpected relief. He had freed himself from a burden that had followed him for so long. The friendship rekindling between them was a sign that they could both move forward, not as lovers, but as allies in the journey of life. Over time, Jake began to reconnect with his passions, developing a new project that motivated him. He discovered that true success wasn't just about material achievements, but about the ability to reinvent himself and surround himself with supportive people. Every small step was a victory, and he felt stronger each day. Now, Jake understood that life is made of new beginnings, and that friendship can be a powerful force for transformation. He wanted everyone to know this. If you have faced challenges and found the strength to start over, share your story in the comments. Let's inspire more people to rise up and fight for their dreams. Like and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and remind us of the power of friendship and resilience. It's time to take action and make a difference.